trusted TV news network.
We've got a severe weather threat.
Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
The Weather Channel.
Port O'Connor, Texas, known as the best kept secret here on the Texas coastline, but not after today. This is where Tropical Storm Beta is heading toward later on today for a landfall very close to this area. So what we're concerned about, though, is the tropical storm force winds, the rain, and most importantly, the water. And really all along the Texas coast, the water is going to be the main concern. You can see behind me in Port O'Connor, and I'm on just a little estuary area that leads into this region. I'm not right on the bay, but look how the water is covering the dock right here. And this is a scene really anywhere that the water comes up. We're at high tide. It's a lengthy high tide that actually runs through 2 cycles right through the overnight, and the water levels have not dropped. And we're running at just about 3 feet here. So we are expecting the storm surge to be a concern. The wind has been from the north. Wind direction, pretty much if it's north, if it's east, or if it's south, will affect us with water in some way here in Port O'Connor. There's just water surrounding us. We've got the Gulf off to our south, and we've got Matagorda Bay off to our east, and just off to the north as well. So that will affect us water-wise. And just from a water perspective, there's a lot of little inlets. This is a great fishing town here, very charming community. People come here to fish, for birding, for paddleboarding, for water sports. And there's a lot of great water for that. Now, normally the water is very flat. You see that behind me, flat. But the video that we can share with you from Port O'Connor on the bay, right over Matagorda Bay, waves are churned up. I'm going to take you there later this morning, actually, to get a read on it. That's going to be the case today as we see tropical storm force winds ramp up through the day today, expecting landfall later today. And here in Port O'Connor, they're asking folks just to stay at home. Wait this out. Schools are closed. A lot of businesses will either be closed or late openings. And just to keep people off the roads is the key thing here into Port O'Connor, Texas. Now let's go down the coast a bit to Rockport, Texas, and check in with Tevin Wooten. Tevin.
Yeah, Jen, you were talking about that water level rise and your tide cycles. We've got a tide cycle for high tide right around 7:11 this morning. Expecting the water rise to be about half a foot. So that doesn't seem like it's a lot, but when you couple that half a foot with that persistent onshore flow from the winds out of the north, then you are talking about water level rises on the order of a foot to perhaps a foot and a half. In terms of the storm surge flooding or the inundation, 1 to 3 feet is what we're anticipating here along the Rockport Fulton area. But let me show you what it looks like right now, because we've already got water starting to rise, and this has really been this way since yesterday when we got here in Rockport. By the way, we're at the State Fishing Pier, if you know where that is. Look beyond this sidewalk or beyond this light pole here. There is a sidewalk completely covered in water on the lowest step, and then I go one more up, and we're pretty much where the water is right now. Over here, 2 boat launch ramps. Those are underwater at this moment as well. And then just beyond me, there's actually a picnic table here. And of course, all of this is designed to flood when you live along a coastal community as such, where the elevation is low. But look at how the water is slashing right into this the road here and through the wall. You can certainly tell that that water is not typically that high, but because of the tide and because of the flow out of the north, that is picking up some of the water. And in fact, it's even white capping at times just beyond me. So it's going to be interesting to see what it looks like during the day. We are along the bay, so keep in mind on the Copano Bay, you don't typically have water coming through like, you know, in the Gulf of Mexico per se. Typically it's flat, it's calm, but certainly not right now because of Beta's impacts. Steph?
All right, want to look about the rest of the tropical Atlantic because it is still hot. You know, of course, we have Beta that is swirling, and there's some of the wave action from it. We have Teddy, which actually could be causing waves that are as high as 100 feet. 100 feet. Making its way towards Nova Scotia. Now, 23 named storms so far in this hyperactive, record-breaking 2020 season, and there's still 6 weeks to go. So what do you say we have a look at our tropical update here and what we are going to be dealing with and what we are dealing with right now? First, we're going to start off with Beta. Winds at 50 miles an hour, and you can see that dry air that's getting pulled into it. But don't let that fool you. All right, look at the rain here into Louisiana. This actually could cause some significant flooding as we head over the next 3 days. And it does look like this Beta will get caught up in a trough and brought eastbound. So you're going to see it all the way from, Corpus to Houston up into Mississippi as we head into our Friday as well. So that is going to be lasting with us for a while. Now, Teddy's actually going to cause a lot of issues along the East Coast, is already causing a lot of issues on the East Coast. Right now, Category 2 storm. And what's interesting about Teddy is it looks like it'll get up to about 105 and then go down. Mainly one of the reasons is because of the upwelling actually from Paulette. And there's a look at the path of Paulette, and that, of course, used up all the warm water at the surface and is pulling up cooler water, and is significantly cooler, 79 degrees. That is significantly cooler for a tropical entity, and it looks like Teddy will go over that. But even if it does, it is still right now propagating waves and combined with the high pressure causing water rises along the east coast of Florida. Nova Scotia, by the way, no stranger to hurricanes this September. We've had 7 landfalls overall. There's been over 20 some odd landfalls in Nova Scotia. But it's Teddy combined with this high pressure that is causing those water rises and those strong waves here all along the east coast, Kelly. We're seeing them anywhere from New England down into Florida.
So 2020, I feel like that's the new phrase of the year, right? 2020 has been stressful, to say the least, especially dealing with the pandemic and the very active hurricane season. So we want you to enjoy a moment of zen, just relax and breathe. Take a look at this sunrise from Port Washington, Wisconsin. Just stunning as the fog rolls over the water of Lake Michigan and that beautiful orange sky. Fall officially begins tomorrow, by the way.
Donald Trump is lying again.
This morning, all eyes are on Tropical Storm Beta, the 23rd named storm for this record-setting hurricane season. It is just off the coast of Texas, and it's already causing flooding. And by the way, that is from the push of water, and we still have a lot of rain that's going to fall out of the system over the next 3 days. Now, so far this year, 8 storms have made landfall on the mainland United States. The record for a single season is 9, set back in 1916, and we could actually tie that record with the landfall of Beta. And by the way, this will be the first landfalling Greek-named storm in the lower 48. Of course, we have a team of meteorologists across the Gulf Coast to bring you the very latest. Jen Carfagno is in Port O'Connor, Texas this morning. Tevin Wooten is in Rockport, Texas this morning, an area that's still actually dealing with the disaster that Hurricane Harvey caused back in 2017. So first, let's have a look at what that push of water, Kelly, is looking like, because there is significant surge in some spots.
I mean, it started over the weekend. Of course, it's on the bay side, and that's because that northeast wind, it was mostly an offshore wind, but we still had that rise of water at the coastline. So Beta already causing storm surge flooding in places like Galveston, Freeport, and Surfside Beach in Texas. Part of the 61st Street fishing pier in Galveston has reportedly collapsed into the Gulf, and you can see the water rushing under the homes on stilts at Surfside Beach. Some roads already underwater, and the impacts, I mean, they're going to last for pretty much all day today in Texas as Beta slowly curls north, eventually making that landfall, Steph. But other areas like, Louisiana already dealing with the effects of it.
Yeah,
too.
I mean, listen, if you live in Louisiana, you cannot sleep on this storm because you're getting this onshore flow, and that's a lot of moisture and a lot of water that's going to be coming on down. We have seen bursts of convection. This thing has been trying, but there is dry air that's actually getting pulled in, and that's one of the reasons that you see these huge dry slots on the satellite here. But it's been a slow mover. It's going to continue to be a slow mover. That, unfortunately, gives more time for the whole rotation around it, right? These storms move counterclockwise like this, and so you're just going to continue to get this rain and flow into Louisiana and into Texas, and that means that we could have some flooding rain. That's going to be the biggest problem with this, the water rise and the rain that's going to fall with it. But I will tell you, even though it's a tropical storm, whoever gets in that eye wall of that tropical storm, you're going to know it's going to be definitely on the breezy side, to say the least. Gusting 26, 25 into Houston here, so you might have some slow travel if you're doing any flying. Tropical storm warnings along Louisiana and Texas coast, and then those thunderstorms too, with those bands that are rotating around the system. But look at all the flash flood watches extending from the eastern parishes of Louisiana all the way down into Rockport as well. And our forecast shows the slow movement of the system we're dealing with. It is Monday. By Friday, it only gets into Memphis. I mean, we can have systems go from the west coast to the east coast in a matter of a few days. This is going to be a slow mover. So how is that affecting Texas? Let's go to Port O'Connor, Texas. That's where meteorologist Jen Carfagno is. And Jen, you know, has that water gone up anymore, or is it kind of reached its max at this point?
Yeah, I don't think it has, Steph. It's been rising. We have some kind of weird double high tide going on overnight. So there was one just about midnight, and now there's another high tide. We don't get down to low tide to this afternoon, and I've been watching the water come up, actually, Steph. So it's hard. It's not as perceptible to the eye, but I'm watching the numbers. And so we were just about 3 feet when I came out here in terms of the tides. Now we're at 3.25. So it is still rising. You can really see it when you can see the dock getting covered right here when you're walking out as you would get to your boat. That's covered, and roads are like this as well across the area. This is a good visual for now. When it gets light out, I'm going to show you some of the roads in surrounding where I am. Last night I had to move my car, and I decided that I was going to walk through the road first to see how high the water was to make sure it was safe to do so. And it came up just to the top of my boots, and that was last night at about 10 o'clock or so. And so the concern is that yes, we could get a little bit higher. That's why here in Calhoun County, Texas, they've said just stay at home. There's a stay-at-home order for today. Wait this out. We do have, about 24 hours total probably of tropical storm-like conditions. The winds will be ramping up. There's another rain band about to come in, I would say in about an hour. You can see it sitting offshore. In fact, earlier this morning, we had a band just as I was getting set up this morning and put down some quick squally conditions and heavy rainfall. But this next batch that comes in looks like it's going to be a little bit more persistent. In fact, we can show you that radar, and we will be watching for the rain to really pick up. So don't think right now we're not in a lot of rain. There is some dry air. It's not a big deal. We will be getting more rainfall. So know that about today. We will be getting more rainfall. For now, though, it is a north wind, and that's a dry north wind. You can sort of feel it in the air, and it's a little bit chilly, too. Let's go down to Rockport, and Tevin, you're getting the same north wind that I'm getting.
Yeah, Jen, we are getting that same north wind. You were talking about the band, so let's get the folks at home caught up to speed with what we're seeing on the radar, because I think we're about maybe 10 or 15 minutes away, if not sooner, from getting some of that rainfall. Let's go ahead and pull up the radar. I'll show you. This may seem like a storm that's lazy by the name of Beta, but perhaps bad to the bone when you do get on some of these outer feeder bands, and then certainly the core of it as well. So you look at the radar, you can see we're about 100 miles away from the center of this storm. Still 50-mile-an-hour winds right now, but some of the strongest gusts we're seeing so far, 25 to 30 miles an hour at time, that recorded at the Rockport Airport. We'll zoom on in a little bit closer, because they may seem small, but let me tell you, they are certainly mighty in nature. When they come through, you will know it. You start with light rainfall and gusty winds, and then all of a sudden you're in a deluge there. So there we go from Port O'Connor all the way down to Rockport, where we are, and just along the St. Charles Bay as well, and the East Bay. Those areas likely to get in on the rainfall pretty much right now. So do keep in mind, if you've got any sort of travel plans this morning, you want to give yourself adequate time and extra time too to get out the door and out the bed and in the car and to wherever you need to go, because those gusty winds, let me tell you, at times if you do have to cross some of the bridges here throughout the barrier islands and also to the mainland, may cause your car to shake or rock a little bit, especially with any sort of north-south or east-west oriented roads in this north-south oriented flow. We'll talk about the surge impacts coming up in about 20 or 25 minutes or so, because Steph, I think that is likely going to be one of the stronger impacts that we see from Beta. Steph.
Yeah, and it's going to be deceiving, right? If you have a big, time without any rain and that water's still coming up. Now, the city of Galveston sits on a sandy barrier island. Look at the roads there. They're already covered in Galveston this morning. It's barely 3 miles across at its widest point. The average elevation 7 feet, and that makes Galveston exceptionally vulnerable to surge. This morning, Justin Michaels reports Galveston is bracing for the worst of Beta's high water.
The threat of up to 4 feet of storm surge and rough seas have beach patrols on high alert in Galveston, Texas.
Our main goal is to keep people safe and to keep people away from the hazards that we have here.
Flooding from Beta is already taking over the streets in Jamaica Beach, Texas. 10 to 15 inches of rain is also forecast. Voluntary evacuations are in place.
We were lucky. We're on the high side.
Molly Krejci lives a few miles away in Galveston's West End, another part of Texas notorious for flooding.
We took my small car and put it in a parking garage downtown Galveston. Just not that the water will get up here, but just in case.
People who live here in the west end of Galveston, well, they listen to emergency management, they listen to the Weather Channel, but there's another telltale sign they really pay attention to know whether or not they should evacuate: the wildlife.
The birds evacuate, I'm not too far behind them.
As the proverbial canaries in the coal mine, the birds evacuated the region before Hurricane Ike back in 2008. Gary Svetska followed them. And when the storm flooded the entire area with 18 feet of water, he was glad he did.
During Ike, they all left.
Everything left. Yeah, it was like a ghost town, ghost island.
But this time around, the birds seemed content to stay.
That's why we decided to stay. Just going to be a big rainmaker, we hope. You know, the birds aren't worried, so I'm not worried.
Businesses along the Texas coast are no stranger to hurricanes and know how to prepare. Guido's has been a staple here for more than 100 years. That's before hurricanes even had names. And so far, the restaurant has only met one storm it couldn't stand up to.
In 1936, our original location at Murdoch's was severely damaged. So many storms throughout the years, Ike, Harvey, and Guido's has been one of the first restaurants to open back up once these storms passed.
That year, a hurricane caused the restaurant to close and rebuild in its current location. Now Guido's and all of Galveston can add Beta to its list of storm stories. In Galveston, Texas, Justin Michaels, The Weather Channel.
Now, Galveston did build a seawall to protect on the Gulf side. They do not have a wall on the Sound side. Okay, that wall was built in 1900 at 17 feet high. It's a concrete barrier. And I've spoken with some Army Corps engineers over the years, and that wall they think has shrunk to 15 feet. But again, Kelly, that flooding is happening here with that push of water in Galveston.
And right there, Steph, it's in the inlet as well as right along the Gulf of Mexico coastline. We have that northeast wind shoving that water up on shore, and that's why we're seeing that water rise and therefore the flooding. That was all storm surge, not rainfall yet with this system. So 3.4 feet at Galveston Bay entrance. That's why you see all the roads covered there. Galveston Railroad Bridge, the pier, also down to St. Louis Pass. We're talking about a storm surge right now at 4.1 feet. Obviously, we'll have to watch high tide, but also the heavy rain that's going to move in because it's going to be harder to get all that water to drain out into the Gulf of Mexico when you have that storm surge pushing that water inland. Flash flood watches are in effect, including Houston, Galveston, over to Lake Charles. Some of these areas hard hit by Laura. Unfortunately, we have terrible weather that's ongoing right now. In fact, you can see the thunderstorms extending well from the center of Tropical Storm Beta all the way over toward New Orleans and Baton Rouge. You can see, but right near the center, we're seeing that convection flare up of storms. And it's going to take a while before we finally move this thing onshore. It's going to make landfall perhaps later on tonight around 11 or midnight. And you can see that happen here on our future radar. But keep in mind, it's not just the coastal event. You see those rain bands that extend all the way up to Shreveport, all the way over to Alexandria, Lafayette, Louisiana. It is just going to be a gully washer of a day, breezy conditions. Can't even rule out the threat for severe weather when you've got a tropical system interacting with land. So we are likely to see flash flooding in that area highlighted in the yellow, including Bay City, Houston. We could see a lot of heavy rainfall, too much, rainfall rates. Really, we have to be watching that. And also over here into eastern Louisiana between tomorrow and Wednesday morning, we're still going to be dealing with the tropical downpours with Beta because it is moving so slowly, Steph, and a lot of people are still recovering from the last tropical system. Yeah, of
course. Hurricane Laura, which made landfall on Wednesday 1 month ago. Devastating Lake Charles, Louisiana. Now Beta is set to unleash heavy rain on southwestern Louisiana. We do have flash flood watches through Wednesday. Some of us could see up to 8 inches of rain. And that, of course, is going to slow the power restoration to the more than 12,000 homes and businesses that still don't have electricity across Lake Charles and Calcasieu parishes. It's tough. It is tough to live without power. And now you're going to have the rain on top of it. And those of you who do have power, getting 5 to 8 inches of rain in a short amount of time, you're talking about a month's plus worth of rainfall that is going to be problematic. And if you have any southerly component to your winds, that's going to bring that onshore push of water. And so you've got to watch for that here along coastal Louisiana. A little bit gusty out there. I mean, you know, gusting 30, 35 miles an hour for some of us here. And that's going to be the story. It's just going to be pretty consistent and persistent as we head over the next several days. So here's that rain coming in. Showers just making their way towards Baton Rouge in the I-10 corridor from Morgan City. And the question is, where does that heavy rain set up? Lafayette, could it be you with the flooding? Absolutely. Could it be just to the east? Could it be in between Lafayette and Baton Rouge? Yes. And this is why you have to pay attention, because we've got to see exactly where those bands set up and bring us the most amount of rain. Kelly.
I wish I could say it was the last day of hurricane season, but we have a ways to go all the way through November. But today is the last day of summer, the last full day. But already we've got a severe case of fall goosebumps going on around the Northeast. Pittsburgh, you're waking up to a nippy temperature reading in the 40s, low 40s at that. It's going to be even cooler come Tuesday morning tomorrow. That's when Pittsburgh is forecast to slide down to 39 degrees. You'll be flirting with record lows for the date, which is actually 37 degrees. So it's a taste of fall. It was a gorgeous weekend, though. You can't deny that. All across the Northeast, even parts of the South, it felt glorious, not just with the cooler weather, but the lower humidity as well. Temperatures currently sitting just above freezing in Albany. We're at 34 degrees right now, so that's why we have the frost advisories and even freeze warnings in effect for some of you through the Catskills and Adirondack region. All right, so Caribou, Maine, so far 29 degrees, not quite the record, but very close. Binghamton getting down to 34 this morning, 36 Syracuse, and 36 degrees in Rochester, within 1 degree of the record for this date. And we're feeling that chill in the South as well. How many of us are turning on the heat? Perhaps in the car, the seat warmer. Yeah, it is definitely a little on the cool side in places like Charlotte, mid-40s, 54 in Atlanta. Just yesterday, we dipped below 60 for the first time in like 94 days. So it has been a very hot, long summer, and now we've got fall settling in all across the South. Average highs are going to be about 5 to 15 degrees below average. High pressure delivering us another glorious day today and tomorrow, but get ready for the end of the week. The heat and humidity do go back up. Steph?
Well, it's time now for your Monday morning front lines. And we're going to start you in Greece, where there was remarkable flooding across the country after a big storm rolled off the Mediterranean Sea. The hurricane-like system is dubbed a Medicane, Mediterranean hurricane. Reports indicate some 5,000 homes have been flooded and at least 2 people killed. Highways and farmland are covered under mud. Bridges have collapsed. Train service is suspended. And back home, the Bobcat fire exploding over the weekend thanks to gusty winds. This fire in northern Los Angeles County doubling in size since Thursday to more than 100,000 acres. Containment is at 15%. And those stiff winds driving flames out of the San Gabriel Mountains and near communities in the Antelope Valley. Several remain under evacuation orders. Okay, we're going to shift back now to the tropics here and go to Jen in Port O'Connor, Texas. Jen, what do you have coming up next?
All right, well, coming up, this is a piece of coast known as the best kept secret on the Texas coast, but not much longer. We're going to get the first landfalling Grinch system here ever in the U.S. Looks like Beta is going to come very close to our location here in Port O'Connor, Texas. So coming up, we're going to talk about timing out the rain, when it's coming in, and look at the extent of the impacts here all along the Texas and Louisiana coast as well. We'll be right back.
At Olive Garden,
You're watching America's most trusted TV news network,
We've got severe weather threat. Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
the Weather Channel. Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we. Get the information you need to stay safe every day, right here on the Weather Channel.
And Hurricane Teddy is a wave maker. Look at these puppies here coming into Bermuda. There you go. There's the big payoff right there. I mean, they are crashing ashore. Woo! This is in Tuckerstown as that 100-mile-per-hour storm churned the waters off the Atlantic. Teddy is now making for rough surf. As Teddy combined with a high pressure along the East Coast that is making for rough surf literally along the entire eastern seaboard. So the waves like that are propagating out, but you just have Teddy, this low pressure, and a high pressure, and they're very close together, and that means rough surf along the entire East Coast. I'll show it to you in a minute. There's Bermuda. Our Cat 2 hurricane is obviously going to get very close to Bermuda and bring some very high wave heights there. But you can see buoys 15, 11 feet, 19 feet off the Carolina coast here, and there's Teddy, and there's high pressure. In between that is called a pressure gradient. It's just like when you put your thumb over the end of a hose and the water squeezes out faster. The winds in between these two systems is getting squeezed in between a smaller area, and that's what's making them accelerate here. So that means with that very fast, strong onshore push, we are going to see coastal issues here anywhere from the northeast to the south. We've already seen some major flooding, Kelly, into Charleston and Florida as well.
Several inches of rain on the east coast of Florida yesterday, too. Just awful. Now we go to the flooding in Texas. Parts of Galveston underwater already, and the system hasn't even made landfall yet. We're talking about homes being damaged, businesses ahead of Beta's landfall, and then we've got the heavier rain and the storm surge still to come. Rough waters, erosion, and storm surge, a major concern for the people of Surfside Beach as well. It's still offshore, but even here, we've been dealing with some surge flooding, and unfortunately, the wave action is just going to pick up as well ahead of landfall. So let's talk about the storm surge. That's the rise of water, seawater above normally dry ground. When you get a tropical system moving in, typically on the right side or of center is where you have the worst of the storm surge. And you can see that we will be dealing with as much as 3 to 5 feet in some locations. And we already have the bay side, the inlet side, that's been experiencing flooding because of that wind direction going more offshore. But of course, as the system moves onshore, it will be a persistent onshore wind at a lot of these locations. So here's a look at the surge flooding, the wave heights too. That's going to be crashing on top of the surge flooding. And remember, we're pretty susceptible when it comes to storm surge, as we do have a shallow shelf leading out into the Gulf of Mexico. A lot of these towns and barrier islands are barely above sea level. We're talking below 10 feet in some areas of southern Texas and even up the Texas coast towards Galveston and Houston. And on top of that, we got the rainwater that's going to fill up these locations. We're talking about several inches of rain possible. All right, let's go back out to Port O'Connor, Texas. Jen Carfagno is there. And Jen, really the flooding that you've been seeing is mostly surge, right? I mean, have you seen any rain there yet?
Yeah, we haven't had a lot of rain yet at all, Kelly. There's been some bands that have come through, but by far it's just the water rise that has contributed to the flooding. Same thing that we're seeing up the coast, actually, all the way up the Texas coast into Louisiana. We've been talking about that too. Here in Port O'Connor, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better because our water levels have been coming up incrementally. We are in moderate flooding right now with some local roads near these estuaries like I am dealing with the flood waters. Speaking of flooding, let's go up to Galveston. I want to bring in Zach Davidson. He's communications director in Galveston County, and this is an area that they've been dealing with the inundation of the water. Zach, thanks for joining us. How did you prepare for this, knowing that you were going to have days of sort of just this coastal inundation of water?
Thank you for having me on this morning. We started preparing back on Thursday when we started to see this storm start to move towards the north. Unfortunately, Hurricane Laura degraded many of our dunes along Galveston Island and the Bolivar Peninsula, which is making this even worse for us right now. We are seeing flooding across our coastal areas. One thing that we did do is on our coastal areas, we started to pre-position our high water vehicles. We've issued mandatory evacuations from many of those low-lying areas in our coastal areas so that those with medical needs and those that wanted to leave could. We haven't seen much of the rain yet, but we are expecting the rain further inland, so we've been making preparations on the mainland. But that's going to be made even worse because the water's not going to have anywhere to drain as the surge has already pushed in so far on our coastline.
You know, this is a great example of, you mentioned Laura, and that didn't make landfall there in Galveston. It was over in Louisiana near Lake Charles. But then also, you know, this system is not going to make landfall there, but yet you're having some really significant impacts. So you don't need to have a direct hit or a landfall to get into this. You know, how has this hurricane season for you been different, considering that it's been so active already and it's forecast to remain active, actually?
Yeah, it has been a very, very active, very busy hurricane season. Actually, we started to see a lot of our first impacts from Hurricane Hannah, which took its toll on some of our dunes, especially on the west end of Galveston Island. Hurricane Laura did not hit here, but it did over $6 million of damage to our dunes. And now we're just kind of without that dune protection. We're in a little bit of a vulnerable situation for this storm.
You certainly are. All right, Zach Davidson, Communications Director with Galveston County, thank you for joining us. Stay safe today. Obviously, this is the day to stay off the roads there in Galveston. And we'll talk more about Port O'Connor coming up.
Your carpets are...
All right, folks, come to your TV screens and check this out. New video into the Weather Channel. This is showing you some of the water that is taking over the streets of Galveston overnight. Look at that water level rise. Look at a couple of stop signs there, too. You can see some of the bases of those covered in water, and so are the sidewalks as well. A driver down off in the distance, turning around, finding an alternate route. That is exactly what you should do if you come across something like this. This is in the city's historic district known as the Strand, and it's completely underwater as bands of rain associated with Tropical Storm Beta make their way onshore. The storm, slowly circling closer to landfall, it will dump a lot more rain and bring the threat of not just heavy rainfall, but also storm surge as well. So you couple those two things together, you do see water level rise like we're seeing there in Galveston. That is why the National Hurricane Center, the National Weather Service, has issued these tropical storm watches and warnings along with the storm surge warnings as well. Welcome back into AMHQ. I'm meteorologist Tevin Wooten, and welcome into Rockport and Fulton, Texas. We're right along the Copano Bay here, and we've actually got one of the outer rainfall bands from Beta moving in right now. In fact, bringing winds between 30 and 35 mile-an-hour gusts at times and periods of heavy rainfall that does reduce visibility too. So you have to keep this in mind. Even though this system is sort of seeming like it's fizzing out or falling apart, you still do have formidable conditions depending on where you are in relation to the storm. We're about 110 miles or so away from the center of Beta, but do believe me, we are expecting the more water to pile on in because the winds are out of the north, so that's this way, and it's starting to cause some of the back bay areas to build up with water from perhaps the St. Charles Bay that starts to work its way into the Copano Bay as well, because the St. Charles Bay is north of where we are, and it's all pushing this flow towards the south. So we're on the opposite side of the flow from the storms. If you think about how an area of low pressure flows in a counterclockwise fashion, we're in the northerly side, but you still do have conditions on the west side of the storm center that can bring you certainly heavy rainfall and flooding as well.
Yeah, Tevin, when we come back to you, I'm curious to know, have any homes or businesses gotten that floodwater inside of them? We'll check back with you in just a little bit here, because we need to give everyone the nuts and bolts of Beta and what it is doing right now. And again, we do have lots of moisture that's going right into Louisiana. There's a lot of dry air also. That's giving us this big dry slot here right through the center of the storm. And there it is. And when it pulls in this dry air, that's not going to allow it to strengthen. Even it's over this nice warm water, perhaps it doesn't have a ton of shear. If there's that much dry air in it, then it's going to have trouble. Now, this heavy rain could cause flooding in Louisiana, but we're also seeing heavy rain that could cause flooding here into Texas. And I'll tell you, even though this is just a tropical storm, whoever gets into the eye wall of this thing, you're going to get some, you'll feel it. You'll know you're in the eye wall of this system. Right now, we have a buoy gusting to 40 miles an hour. So as this all rotates through, and again, it's moving this is going to be with us the entire week, by the way. It's not going to get into Mississippi until Friday. And we can have systems go from the west coast to the east coast in just a matter of a couple days. That tells you how slow it is. It is likely we'll see some flooding here around Houston, Galveston. In fact, we already are. A lot of that flooding is really just from the push of water. While our flooding here into Louisiana, a lot of that, yes, we're going to get that onshore push, but a lot of that is going to be from the rainfall that's coming down as well. And that rain will rotate into Texas, Freeport, Liverpool, Wharton. You know, the highways here are going to be dealing with anywhere from 3 to 5 inches of rain, and then someone will, of course, get higher than that. There's always someone who gets higher than, you know, that highest forecast. And there it is for us still to come here. Notice Louisiana. I don't know how to say it enough, Kelly. People need to be paying attention in the parishes of Louisiana.
Yeah, especially those areas still without power and drinking water from Hurricane Laura just about a month ago. So, of course, the impacts don't stop at the coastline. We will feel those impacts even inland, as Steph just talked about. It's going to take a while to move this thing eventually on shore overnight tonight into tomorrow morning. So it's all about Texas today and Louisiana with those outer rain bands. And then we move our system up into the northern parts, like parts of Arkansas, Mississippi. It's a depression by this point, but you guys know even a depression can cause a lot of heavy rainfall. And in fact, the European model does show that we could see a huge swath of 3 to 5 inches. That's in the yellow, but there are some places up in the North Georgia mountains, for example, where we could pick up as much as 5 to 8. This is from Wednesday through Saturday. So we still have some time to prepare for this. Clean out the gutters, make sure your yard is ready to accept the rainfall that Beta brings. But the American model certainly not showing as much as the European. So let's hope that the American model actually plays out here. All right, Jackson, Mississippi, be prepared for the heavy downpours, showers, thunderstorms starting up Wednesday night into Thursday. One good news is holding our temperatures down just a little bit. It's otherwise very muggy down here along the Gulf Coast. And the European model does show some of those heavier rainfall bands moving into the northern parts of Alabama and North Georgia as we close out the week. Atlanta, Georgia, we have a serious surplus for the year. We've got more rain coming, and it looks like that rain will continue toward the weekend. The Weather Channel has you covered. Our meteorologists fanned out along the Texas coastline. We will have more coming up on AMHQ.
Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow! Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
Well, if you're doing any traveling, we want to give you your travel forecast, and it's going to be tough going here throughout some portions in Louisiana and Texas. And this will be the story for the next several days. And here's the thing. Beta is actually going to go inland in Texas and then scoop around back into Louisiana and Mississippi. So here's the rain that's coming in because there's just broad circulation around the system. So showers coming up. If you're doing that drive along I-10, you could run into some of these heavier downpours. That could slow you down. And unfortunately, some of them could be on the stormy side as well. So keep that in mind here. Anywhere you see the red shading, that's where you could see some of those stronger thunderstorms fire up. And the real problem is going to be where you have training going on. And we're going to see these cells set up. This is just kind of guidance. All this is really telling us is that we know that somewhere is going to see that onshore flow and rain and rain and rain and rain. And we're going to see flooding in some spots. And so where exactly that sets up, you're going to have to stay tuned to the Weather Channel. Anywhere from 8 to 12, maybe 12 to 18 inches of rain in some places. Again, wherever that one band sets up is going to give us extremely heavy rain. Kelly, it's too bad we can't take this and send it to the West Coast.
I mean, we desperately need it, Steph, especially in California, where the wildfire season just keeps on surging deeper and deeper into record territory. One reason, the Bobcat fire in northern Los Angeles County. Winds gusting 30 to 40 miles per hour let the fire explode to 100,000 acres over the weekend. It has doubled in size since Thursday. Containment just 15%. And then there's the El Dorado fire in San Bernardino County. It's a quarter the size of the Bobcat fire and nearly 60% contained. This fire was actually set by a gender reveal celebration. A firefighter lost his life battling this blaze just last week. So many people affected by the fires, displaced from their homes, and also breathing in the smoke. I mean, it is really bad out here. The air quality with so many fires that we're keeping track of from the northern part of the state all the way down to the El Dorado fire. So 3.5 million acres. Yeah, that's a state record for California. You can see that we're rivaling the tough years of 2018, 2017 also on this list, which was just a devastating fire season. And in Oregon, we're keeping track here too with over 1 million acres consumed. We did get some much needed rain over the fires just late last week. And guess what? We've got another system that's coming our way. I wish we could bring it all the way down, right, into the state of California. But at least this system in the Aleutian Islands, that will eventually move on shore. And with that, there will be some good rain here across Washington, Oregon, even Northern California. As we head towards Thursday and Friday, we'll start to see some of that rainfall over the fires, right over the fires here. So that should at least give us some relief and help out the firefighters who are working basically basically around the clock trying to contain these fires. So here's a look at the next 7 days, and look at the orange. Yeah, we're talking 5 to 8 inches of rain in some parts of Washington state, Oregon maybe not as much, and of course California barely anything, just the northern part of the state getting some of that relief. But our rainy season on the West Coast typically does pick up as we go deeper into the fall season. Certainly by November, above average wildfire potential here across the state of California going forward. Steph.
Well, it only took minutes for the home he'd built over years to disappear. The man you're about to meet lost everything when a wildfire swept onto his property and destroyed his home. And what makes Bob Lipkin's story even worse is he watched it happen on video, powerless to stop it. He tells his remarkable story this morning to the Weather Channel's Justin Michaels.
It's hard to imagine living through a wildfire, even harder still to imagine losing your house. But can you imagine having the video of it burning? Welcome to the reality of Bob Lipkin.
The way a fire can sweep through somebody from nothing to gone in 7 minutes. It's crazy.
This is the video caught on a small security camera in Bob's front window.
Somebody gave me this little cheap $25, $35 camera that I'd stuck up in a window, and it was hooked to Wi-Fi.
It rolled, capturing every detail. Now, it's important to note, this video is not sped up. This is the North Complex wildfire in Berry Creek, California in real time. The trees in Bob's front yard were 100 feet tall. The flames, even taller.
I mean, literally, I could hardly watch it. I was shaking so much.
A friend of Bob's is a firefighter and sent him these photographs, before and after.
We have a 7-foot bronze grizzly, Mad Max, standing in our front door, and he was still standing. And the 2 stone pillars that held up the carport to the house were still standing. We're going to keep those there.
Now, Bob knows it's going to be a long road before they can ever get back to the property. So he keeps a mantra in his mind he's lived by for all of his 76 years.
I've got a saying that attitude is the difference between an ordeal and an adventure. And the only difference, that. I'm trying to keep a good attitude.
In Oroville, California, Justin Michaels, The Weather Channel.
Very impressive man right there. Right now, more than 17,000 firefighters are deployed at 26 active fires across the state, making this one of the worst fire seasons in California history. Kelly.
All right, meantime, there's weather going on across the east, and that would be the cool weather, the taste of fall that we are experiencing. Temperatures in the 30s, so if you go out the door this morning, you're running back inside to find your jacket. 34 Binghamton, 34 in Burlington, very close to record lows in some cases, and your afternoon highs are only going to be in the 60s across the region from Bangor to New York City, even the southeast, experiencing temperatures below average this morning and tomorrow as well.
When you've got most trusted TV news network,
We've got a severe weather threat. Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
The Weather Channel.
Tropical storm Beta is sitting less than 100 miles off the coast from us here in Port O'Connor, Texas. There's a good chance that it's coming in very close to my location later on today. It's another slow mover, moving at barely a jogging speed, 6 miles per hour, but it is inching closer to the coast, moving on that westward track, and will be here later today. The impacts have been far-reaching up and down the Texas coast into Louisiana, and here in Port O'Connor, it's been mainly about the water and the water rise so far. We've had a pretty steady north wind throughout the duration of this, and that has raised the water levels here. Tides are running 3.85 right now, so that's above. We're moderate flooding, expecting that to last through the day because our next tide is low tide that comes in this afternoon. You can actually see the water behind me covering up some of the docks. You can get a sense of the winds too as you look at the trees here. So the winds have been gusty, close to tropical storm force gusts throughout the morning. Looking at the tide station there, we've been running up in the upper 30s, gusting pretty much all night long. It's going to ramp up through today as the system gets closer. It's got a large wind field. The wind field extends 175 miles in terms of the extent of tropical storm force conditions, but especially up to the north. That's why you're feeling the gusty winds all the way up the Texas coast into Louisiana. Now, here in Port O'Connor, in a little bit, as soon as we get some daylight, I'm going to take you and show you some of the roads which are covered with water. That's why here in Calhoun County, they've said, you know what, stay at home today. In fact, they've issued a stay-at-home order to get people and keep people off the roads. This is a quiet little town right here. It's a popular fishing town. It's very charming, but certainly, go up to Port Lavaca, you'll be dealing with the same conditions. Victoria, you're going to have some rain there as well and the gusty winds here. So it's just a good day to hunker down and wait this out, especially because of the duration. Tevin, I want to send it back to you in Rockport. And we know that a system, even if it's not that strong, if it's got a long duration of wind, of water, getting those levels getting pushed higher, of rainfall, it really can have impacts sort of beyond what you might expect.
Yeah, and we've already seen the beginning stages of that sort of long duration event. Yesterday we had winds at 15 to 20 miles an hour, but they're out of the north. And so that persistent onshore flow from the north does something like this, takes a parking lot and starts to submerge it underwater. Now this is a parking lot, but it's also a boat launch ramp here. We've got two launch areas. I'll walk over to show you sort of the sidewalk that's covered in water right now. This is about maybe 4 or 5 inches of water at its lowest point, and then you take a step up, and all of a sudden you're back at the highest point here on the sidewalk. But high tide, that's right around 7:11, so we've got another 15, 20 minutes or so before we perhaps see the tide start to go back out. It doesn't look like it's grown much since we started the day out here, which is good news, but for some of these low-lying areas that are already pretty much at sea level and maybe even below, you combine the high tide with this onshore flow, then you talk about storm surge and tidal flooding as well. So we've got about 1 to 3 feet potentially of storm surge flooding from Tropical Storm Beta anticipated throughout portions of the Texas Gulf Coast, through the Aransas Bay area as well, and all the way down into the northbound into the St. Charles Bay. A lot of rainfall right now. This is perhaps starting to trail off, though, as we get into this sort of the backside of this outer band. So I do anticipate drying out perhaps within the next 15 to 25 minutes or so. But do not be fooled. Beta is still about 100 and 110 miles away, Steph. So overall, as these winds as the storm moves closer, the winds do get stronger from Tropical Storm Beta. Steph?
And Beta is not the only player in town, right? Of course, we do have Beta, and you can see that here in the Gulf of Mexico. But we also have Teddy, which, sticks out like a sore thumb here out in the Atlantic. And that's causing that onshore push in combination actually with a high pressure, onshore push and waves and flooding all along from New England down into Florida, as a matter of fact. Now, we're going to talk more about what we are dealing with here in the tropics, because there are two systems that are really taking all of our attention. And we're going to start you off with Beta, because that's the one that is actually closest to the United States here. We do have that rain that's coming into Louisiana, a lot of heavy rain. We could see flooding in Louisiana, even though the storm is going into Texas. Though, by the way, the storm is going to go into Texas and end up in Mississippi by Friday. That just tells you how slow it's moving, because we could get a whole system go from the West Coast to the East Coast in boom, 3 days. This has been out here for how long? And it's still going to take the entire week to get into Mississippi. Not a lot pushing it around. Teddy, however, is actually much stronger, Category 2, and it is giving us a lot of wave action and a lot of high tides here and a lot of just high water rise along the East Coast. One thing that Teddy is going to be fighting against is cooler water temperatures. You see this little tongue of cooler water right there? That is actually the upwelling from Paulette. Now, remember, these hurricanes are going to use that water right on top, and that is where you have the warmest of water. And now our water temperature is 74 versus 84, where we haven't had any upwelling. And that's significant. I should say 79. Sorry about that. But that is significant. Tropical entities like it 80 or higher, and then it's going to be perhaps pounding right into Nova Scotia. They have had landfalls in September. In fact, 7 if you go back to 1950. And for the whole year, they've had, I think it was like 26 named storms make landfall into Nova Scotia. But how will it affect us? Well, here's Teddy. Here's our high pressure. And the pressure gradient in between the two is going to make those winds stronger and faster and give us that onshore push. And so, Kelly, all along the coast, we're going to have that water rise and those waves as we head throughout the next couple of days.
Yeah, no beach weather for sure up and down the East Coast. Well, 2020 has indeed been very stressful, to say the least, especially dealing with the pandemic and our very active hurricane season. So we want to take a moment of zen and just enjoy this video right here. What's more relaxing than a sunrise? This is in Belgium, Wisconsin at Harrington Beach State Park. We'll be right back.
Well, this morning, all eyes are on Tropical Storm Beta, the 23rd named storm. Isn't it incredible? It is a record-setting hurricane season. It's just off the Texas coast, and it's already causing flooding into Texas and into Louisiana. We've seen a lot of heavy rain. Now, this year, we have had 8 storms make landfall on the mainland United States. The record for a single season is 9. That was set back in 1916, and we could tie that record later tonight with the landfall of Beta. And by the way, it would be the first time we had a storm in the Greek alphabet make landfall in the lower 48. So, of course, we have a team of meteorologists along the Gulf Coast to bring you the latest. Jen Carfagno is live in Port O'Connor, Texas this morning. Tevin Wooten is live this morning in Rockport, Texas, an area still dealing with the disaster that Hurricane Harvey brought back in 2017. But first, let's show you, Kelly, what it's looked like from Beta so far over the last couple of days.
Yeah, the flooding, Steph, really began over the weekend, well ahead of Beta, even getting close to the Texas coastline. So it's been causing some storm surge flooding in places like Lake Galveston, Freeport, and Surfside Beach in Texas. Part of the 61st Street fishing pier in Galveston has collapsed into the Gulf, and you can see the water just rushing under the homes on stilts at Surfside Beach, and some roads are already underwater. The impacts will likely last for days. We were talking landfall in Texas, but Steph, this thing is going to be in Texas today, tomorrow. It's going to take pretty much all week for it to move out of our hair, right?
It won't be getting into Mississippi until Friday, so this is a week-long event, and it's a big, broad area. So we have all that moisture going into Louisiana, and so that's where we could see significant flooding as well. There's been some convective bursts with this. It's been trying to get its act together, but there's a lot of dry air that's being pulled into it. And so that's one of the reasons that it's not really able to explode. But that really doesn't matter because you're still going to see that heavy rain coming on down with this system. And I'll tell you, whoever ends up in that eye wall, you will know that you're in the eye wall of a tropical storm. Wind gust to 43 miles an hour. Actually, I want to go back to that real quick because I want to make a point for when I go to Jen. Look at the winds on this, okay? You're going to see that we have a north wind, right? It's a counterclockwise flow here. And so you have a north wind. And so that's going to make a difference on where your flooding happens. And as those winds shift around, will make a difference on who gets the flooding. And that's something we're going to have to watch very closely. We have those tropical storm warnings here along the coast of Texas and Louisiana, the threat for stronger thunderstorms, and then, of course, flash flood watches. And by the way, a lot of these lasting until midweek. Notice it eventually gets inland, but it takes until Friday to get to Mississippi. We can see a system go from the west coast to the east coast in like 3 days. This is going to take a week. All right, let's talk to Jen about those winds because wind direction is going to be everything, Jen, on who is seeing the flooding when. And I feel like a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm not right on the Gulf of Mexico, I'll be fine. But if you are on the west side of some of these barrier islands, you could get more significant flooding than those people on the Gulf, depending on what time you're dealing with this system.
Well, exactly, Steph. And, you know, here in Port O'Connor, winds from almost every direction will get us. You know, from the north, we're obviously getting water. From the east, we'll get a lot of water. From the south, we'll get water because of the Gulf. We're sitting right on the Matagorda Bay and the Gulf of Mexico. So really, the west wind would be the only wind that we wouldn't have issues here. We saw it in Galveston. We're seeing it in Galveston right now. It was interesting when I talked with the communications director earlier there, and they said, you know, they had some big impacts from Hannah. They had big impacts from Laura. And Laura came in over to their east, and so they had that north flow, and that affected their dunes on the north side of the island. So honestly, wherever there's water, you know, there's the potential for a wind direction, I think, to have an impact. And it is all about water with the system. I changed locations. I don't know if you can tell. I came over on the other side of where these docks are, where boats would normally pull in, and you'd be able to walk out and get on your boat, because I wanted to come on this pavilion and just see how high the water was over here. I stepped down just one step off the pavilion, and all of these benches that are sitting around are underwater. And so once we get a little more daylight, I'll be able to show you the roads surrounding this inn that pretty much inundate, in some cases water that's up to just below my knees. And so this is why folks are asked to stay home today across this region, you know, all across really the Victoria Crossroads area, is that wherever there's little estuaries and inlets and water that can seep in, it will. The tide levels are up. We don't get to low tide until this afternoon. And so unfortunately, we're going to be dealing with this water throughout the day. And then we get into the rain as we get through the afternoon as well. All right, let's go back down to Rockport and talk more with Tevin. And Tevin, I imagine you're seeing sort of some of the same issues with water as well. Wherever you have water that can get in, it will, with the kind of duration we've had already with the system.
Yeah, absolutely, Jen. We've had rainfall for about 2 to 3 hours or so as well out here. So if you couple that with the storm surge, now you've got water trying to drain out from the rain, but it can't drain out because the surge is pushing that water right back in. And then we've got the winds from the north. So places like, Steph mentioned it just a moment ago, it's really well put, by the way, places like San Jose Island, if you are on the barrier island and your winds and that onshore flow is from the north, you may get worse storm surge on the north side or on the south side than those on the Gulf side get, because of the wind direction pulling everything out. So it's all dependent on that configuration. If we look at the radar right now, we're close to about 100, maybe 110 miles away from the center of Beta, but still seeing some gusty winds at times right around 30 to 35 miles an hour. The rainfall is starting to fizzle out here. This may be sort of one of the drier spells we see. I do think we'll have rain closer to midday today for some of the strongest bands that are starting to set up. So this is sort of the outer reaching bands from Beta, but still more are coming in. But overall, we're on the western side of what's anticipated to be the landfall. So all the direction or all the flow will come from a northerly direction. But still, that can add up when you start to pile some of this water in. North is this way. So if everything flows in this way, guess what we're doing? Now, the water is coming in this way because of the direction of how this little port or this dock is configured. But overall, with the bay being right there, a lot of that water, Steph, does start to push in. So it's not just folks living along the Gulf seeing impacts from Beta.
Yeah, it is. And what's going to be interesting is you're going to have clear skies at times and still have that water come up. Let's look at Galveston. Look at the flooding in Galveston. That is significant. You can see that people have put sandbags up, but you can barely see the streets there. There's another shot for you, and you see that there's dry streets, and then there's flooding right at that corner. Of course, the city of Galveston sits on a sandy barrier island, and it's barely 3 miles across at its widest point. The average elevation, 7 feet. That makes it exceptionally vulnerable to surge. New this morning, Justin Michaels reports Galveston is bracing for the worst of Beta's high water.
The threat of up to 4 feet of storm surge and rough seas have beach patrols on high alert in Galveston, Texas.
Our main goal is to keep people safe and to keep people away from the hazards that we have here.
Flooding from Beta is already taking over the streets in Jamaica Beach, Texas. 10 to 15 inches of rain is also forecast. Voluntary evacuations are in place.
We were lucky. We're on the high side.
Molly Krejci lives a few miles away in Galveston's West End, another part of Texas notorious for flooding.
We took my small car and put it in a parking garage downtown Galveston. Just not that the water will get up here, but just in case.
People who live here in the west end of Galveston, well, they listen to emergency management, they listen to the Weather Channel, but there's another telltale sign they really pay attention to know whether or not they should evacuate: the wildlife.
If the birds evacuate, I'm not too far behind them.
As the proverbial canaries in the coal mine, the birds evacuated the region before Hurricane Ike back in 2008. Gary Svetska followed them, and when the storm flooded the entire area with 18 feet of water, he was glad he did.
During Ike, they all left.
Everything left. Yeah, it was like a ghost town, ghost island.
But this time around, the birds seemed content to stay.
That's why we decided to stay. Just going to be a big rainmaker, we hope. You know, the birds aren't worried, so I'm not worried.
Businesses along the Texas coast are no stranger to hurricanes and know how to prepare. Guido's has been a staple here for more than 100 years. That's before hurricanes even had names. And so far, the restaurant has only met one storm it couldn't stand up to.
In 1936, our original location at Murdoch's was severely damaged. So many storms throughout the years. Ike, Harvey, and Guido's has been one of the first restaurants to open back up once these storms pass.
That year, a hurricane caused the restaurant to close and rebuild in its current location. Now Guido's and all of Galveston can add Beta to its list of storm stories. In Galveston, Texas, Justin Michaels, The Weather Channel.
Now remember, Galveston built its protective seawall after the catastrophic hurricane of 1900. It was 17 feet high, though over the years it's settled some. Army Corps of Engineers people have told me over the years it's probably more around 15 feet high, and it did protect the city from surge until 2008 when Ike had water overtopping it there. Experts have proposed an Ike Dike, a massive gate to close off Galveston Bay from the surge, but the project has never gotten off the ground. But Kelly, that also does not protect if you're coming from the other side, the sound side, with that water pushing in. There's nothing on the back side of the island.
Exactly, and we are seeing, inlet side flooding as well as right along the Gulf of Mexico. Now, the levels have come down a little bit. They were over 4 feet at a lot of these locations, but that will be the story of the day. They are going to fluctuate, especially at times of high tide, but you're still pushing 4 feet at a place like San Luis Pass. So we're already seeing the surge flooding where we just saw Tevin and Rockport. The rain is coming down too, and that rain has nowhere to go because of the surge. So you are concerned more about a flash flood event when it comes to heavy rainfall, places like Houston, Galveston, even over towards Louisiana, where we're still recovering from previous tropical systems like Laura. So there's a look at where the center is, only about 70 miles now offshore of where Jen is in Port O'Connor. And then you've got the rain bands that extend well from the center all the way into Louisiana. You've got lightning and heavy rain that's already begun, and it's only going to get worse. Even though the system does make a landfall in Texas eventually later on today toward the evening time frame, you are going to be dealing with the heavy rain kind of training over the same areas over and over again across the parishes of Louisiana and back into Texas too. That rain is going to be very heavy in Houston. We'll have to watch the rainfall rates because that will determine if we get any flooding or not, but you are in that zone where we're likely to get flooding between now and tomorrow morning, and then we push that zone over into portions of eastern Louisiana, Steph, for the day tomorrow.
Wednesday will mark 1 month since Category 4 Hurricane Laura devastated Lake Charles, Louisiana. Now Beta is set to unleash heavy rain into southwestern Louisiana. Flash flood watches in effect through Wednesday, maybe 4 to 8 inches in some places. That could slow repairs and power restoration. And more than 12,000 homes and businesses still don't have electricity across Lake Charles and Calcasieu Parish, a month after the storm came in. That's tough. It is tough to clean up. It's so hot outside, you can't get any sort of break there. Let's talk about what we are going to be dealing with. Now, even inland, some of us could get some of that heavier rain here from this system. Now, don't forget, you're going to get that onshore push of water into Louisiana. Look at Beaumont gusting to 33, Lake Charles gusting, near 40 miles an hour. So we're going to have some of those breezier conditions out there for us. But I do think the rain is going to be our biggest problem, as it's just going to be non-stop here. Now, light showers pushing ashore, some of us getting a little bit of heavier rain in some of the southern parishes here, but it's all where the band is going to set up, or bands, I should say, that go right over the same areas. Lafayette, you could see a lot of rainfall. Baton Rouge, it could be you, down to Morgan City, Homa. This is just guidance. So you've got to stay tuned to the Weather Channel to see exactly where those rain bands are going to set up, and that's where you will experience significant flooding. So it is likely anywhere from Baton Rouge to Morgan City over into the west part of Pontchartrain, where we could see some of those heaviest totals here through Wednesday. Some of us could see, Kelly, more than a month's worth of rain.
Wow. All right. Now I'm seeing lots of reports of frost out there in the Northeast. We are flirting with record low temperatures this morning, and we'll likely see that again tomorrow morning. Plenty of places in the 30s, like Albany to Binghamton, up towards Burlington as well. And as I mentioned, we're close to records in a few spots. Keeping track so far this morning, Caribou, Maine, 34 degrees. Binghamton, probably not quite going to reach the record, which is 31, but Syracuse within 2, and Rochester, 38 degrees. The record to beat is 35. We are feeling the chill all the way down the southeast. No need for the AC. We didn't need it over the weekend, that's for sure, with temperatures running below average, and we are going to continue to see the highs anywhere from 5 to 15 degrees below average. And fall officially begins tomorrow morning at 9:31 Eastern time. All right, high pressure delivering not just dry air, but also the cooler temperatures over the next couple of days. But it's not going to last the whole week, especially in the south. We are going to see that rise in temperature and humidity, by the way. So if you like the cool, this is what you get for tomorrow morning. Temperatures dropping through the 30s and 40s. So cover up the plants or bring them inside just in case.
Those lower dew points too, not making it feel a lot colder as well. We want to check on your morning headlines, and Hurricane Teddy is way out in the Atlantic east of Bermuda, but it's helping, combined with a high pressure, kick off big swells along the east coast today. Coastlines along Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket. We can see pockets of flooding and beach erosion, and in fact, that stretches all the way down to North Carolina's Highway 12. All right, we saw the highway overwashing there. This is through the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Look at this great shot with the flooding and the dunes and just waves crashing over. The stretch of road is closed this morning. The barrier island is under a coastal flood warning. Look at that right there until 2 o'clock this afternoon. Swimmers and surfers take note. High risk of rip currents all along the eastern seaboard today. And of course, they will get front end loaders to get all that sand off of those roads. All right, let's go back to Jen Carfagno in Port O'Connor, Texas. Jen, what do you have coming up?
All right, well, coming up here, now that we're getting some daylight, I can show you what the roads look like. I'm actually standing on one right now, and there's water covering. So talk about how deep this is. We're also going to go back to Texas and Houston and talk more with Jeff Lindner about the flooding potential in Houston today and what they are doing to plan for it. We'll be right back.
You're watching America's most trusted TV news network.
We've got a severe weather threat. Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
The Weather Channel. Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we. Get the information you need to stay safe every day, right here on the Weather Channel.
And you got to see these big waves here breaking in the Outer Banks this weekend. Hurricane Teddy churns out in the Atlantic. Rough surf along those East Coast beaches. This is the Outer Banks. Now the wind is way out to sea, packing winds of 100 miles an hour. But as you can see on Sunday, we did have a lot of that overwash. Highway 12, there it is right there. Notorious, absolutely notorious for getting flooded and also getting sand tossed on top of it. They have front end loaders there to get the sand off of it. And by the way, portions of it is closed. there. That boat looks like it's been there actually for quite a while. Let's have a look at Teddy, because it's not only North Carolina that's seeing that onshore push and those stronger winds and the surge and everything. It's all along the eastern seaboard. So here's a look at Teddy right now. There's Bermuda getting crushed with the waves there, 100-mile-an-hour winds, and you'll see those buoys there, 19 feet, 14 feet. But look at that, 19 feet off the coast of the Carolinas, 11 as we go off the southeast coast. And it's the combination of Teddy and our high pressure. In between those two, you're getting stronger winds, because it's like when you put your thumb over the end of a hose and the water comes out faster, there's less room, so the winds go faster and they're stronger, and that's what we are dealing with here. So there's your coastal flood advisories. Kelly, anywhere, literally from New England down to Florida, we have seen issues and we're going to see issues.
Yeah, some of it major flooding in parts of Charleston as well. Now we go to the Gulf of Mexico, where parts of Galveston already underwater as we have more moisture on the way, more heavy rain and storm surge. And the flooding has already damaged homes and businesses on Sunday, well ahead of Beta's landfall, which is likely to come later today. Rough waters, erosion, and storm surge, a major concern for the people of Surfside Beach as well. Even though Beta is still offshore, those winds will be kicking up, the wave action, and we're talking about some heavy amounts of rainfall to go along with the storm surge. So even though it is a tropical storm, maybe not a hurricane, you can still get storm surge flooding as high as 3 to 5 feet. That's what the National Hurricane Center is saying. That's water above normally dry ground, and especially at times of high tide, you will have an exaggeration of some of these levels. So here's a look at our small Beta, which is about 70 miles just offshore Port O'Connor. You can see the convection flaring up right near the center, but even over toward Louisiana, we've been dealing with heavy rain, and you can see what the wave heights are doing right now just offshore of some of these barrier islands between 10 and 12 feet. We've got that shallow shelf here in the Gulf of Mexico, making us very susceptible and vulnerable to flooding, especially given that a lot of these locations are below sea level. We're talking about below 10 feet actually in elevation up towards Galveston Bay, where already we've seen some of that storm surge flooding. All right, let's go back out to Port O'Connor, Texas. Jen, the rain is only going to get worse, and that's on top of some of the surge flooding that you're seeing right now.
Well, exactly, Kelly. We're sitting at 7 feet. You mentioned low elevation. So low elevation here. Reason why we do have that storm surge warning up and concerned about, the 2 to 4 foot storm surge we could get. I do want to show you this water. Let me walk back into it so you can get a sense of this. This is a street, and this is what some of the streets next to some of the estuaries and little inlet areas will be dealing with here. This overwash that comes on in. And so, I mean, this is up not about more than half my boot right here, but you go a little bit deeper and it's getting close to the top of my boots. This is why you don't want to be driving around, because you encounter roads like this. You don't know, is it too deep for your vehicle, right? Now, flooding on streets is something certainly that Houston is no stranger to. In general, big, heavy rainstorms. But let's talk more about Houston. I want to bring in Jeff Lindner right now, meteorologist with the Harris County Flood Control District, and talk about Houston today. Jeff, what is the major concern for the city of Houston at this point?
Yeah, right now for Harris County, our main concern is not along the coast like you're showing. We have the similar conditions going on in the southeast part of Harris County in our coastal areas. We have tides running anywhere from 4 to 5 feet. Total water right now in the Seabrook, Pima, Nassau Bay, Shore Acres area. And so we are monitoring that closely. And then as we continue to move through the day and into tonight and tomorrow, we'll be focusing on the heavy rain threat. And really for us up here, it looks like more of the banding in the eastern side of that storm. And so we could go several hours without rain, and then we could get one of these bands that leads to some very heavy rain. So we're going to be watching that over the next 48 hours.
What have you guys been doing to prepare for the rain and the surge ultimately that impacts how the rain gets back out?
Yeah, we've been monitoring the situation all weekend long. Obviously, these tides started coming up on Saturday, and we're starting to see the peak of those tides right now. And so we've had our crews out monitoring the situation. We have them out this morning taking pictures and taking tape measurements of how high the water is in certain areas and making sure that our gauge network is operational. It's fully operational this morning to monitor the water levels and the potential rainfall that could be coming later today and into tomorrow.
Yeah, Jeff, I mean, you guys are no stranger to this, but what happens if the rainfall is too much? Are there plans in place for that?
Yeah, absolutely. We will continue to monitor and see how the rainfall unfolds. And then we have been in coordination with our transportation partners and our emergency management partners on plans for if we do get heavy rainfall and flooding, that they will continue to monitor the situation and block off certain underpasses and roadways where we've had problems in the past.
Well, excellent. Jeff Lindner with the Harris County Flood Control District. Thank you, as always, for joining us and for the good information. And it really is a good day to stay home. Obviously, here in Port O'Connor, the weather is not bad yet, but we'll get into some of those rain bands. We could get a landfall. It's just less than 100 miles off the coast from us. We'll be tracking it towards the coast this afternoon.
We make it so you can take it on any adventure, but only you can create the memories. We've made it the longest lasting, but only you can make it family. And that's why, for 80 years, we don't make Jeep, you do.
Right now, get $3,750 combined cash allowance plus $750 bonus cash on 2020 Jeep Cherokee models.
Morning, noon, night. Indulgent, delicious, irresistible. Fancy Feast makes delighting your cat delightfully easy. Every recipe, every last detail. Another fancy way to show your love. Fancy Feast. Try savory centers. Pâté with a center of gravy.
Owners of select competitive vehicles can get $500 toward a new Acura ILX.
With moderate to severe ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease, your plans can change at any time. Your head wants to do one thing, but your gut says, not today. GI-focused Entyvio is made for this. Entyvio acts specifically.
Texas just cannot seem to catch a break. 1 month after Hurricane Laura lashed the eastern part of that state. State is bracing yet again, but this time it is for Beta. Tropical storm Beta is expected to be a rainmaker as it closes in on the coast, bringing storm surge and flood risk with it. What you're seeing right now, that is some of the flooding from yesterday that we saw in Freeport, Texas. So just south of the Houston metro and along the Gulf Coast. Welcome back into AMHQ. I'm meteorologist Tevin Wooten, and welcome back into Rockport and the Fulton, Texas area. We're along the Aransas Bay and the Copano Bay. Here you can see we are seeing some storm surge flooding. We've really seen this play out over the last 24 hours with a persistent flow from the north. So north this general direction, but because we are in the bay, we're actually getting some water from the St. Charles area and points towards the north that really just flow a lot of that water and funnel a lot of that water southbound, even though you would think, well, isn't the storm approaching from the south or from the east? Yes, it is, but because we're protected by the barrier island, we're still seeing some of the flooding from the sound and the bay. Out though into the bay, you can tell some of the water is white capping at times because it is so strong as it moves in. This is a picnic table area, and when you really build something like this, you have to build it to flood because you are so close to sea level, if not right at sea level. So because of the elevation, because of the tide cycle, this area here, this little pier area does flood, the Fisherman's Pier does flood. So they do have water coming up, not just near the picnic table, also on the sidewalk as well, and then some of the zones where the boats would typically launch from, starting to see water come up too. So overall, right now, we're starting to dry out. I do think we have a dry slot, and we'll hold on to that for the next 5 to 10 hours. High tide just about 10 or so minutes ago, closer to 7-11. So Steph, even though the water has come up with high tide, it has not come up to certainly levels that creep into homes right now throughout the Rockport area.
Yeah, and I think it's really deceiving that, you might not have any rain, but that water is still going to be coming up. So that's something to keep in mind here. And remember, it only takes 6 inches of swiftly moving water to knock you off your feet, 2 feet of moving water to float and move a car. So you have to keep all these things in mind. You think, oh, it's just a tropical storm, it's not really raining, but you can find yourself in trouble with these systems. So rain into Louisiana. I can't stress it enough. Do not sleep on this storm if you live in Louisiana. You guys could have some of the heaviest rain, actually, when all is said and done. True story. And you'll see some bursts of convection. This thing is trying. It's really, really trying. But you've got that dry air coming in around this, and it's just going to keep feeding into it. And so that's why the forecast right now is for this not to strengthen. But we'll keep a close eye on it. And if you are in that eye wall, you'll know it. You'll know it once this thing comes ashore here. Otherwise, look at the storms and showers and thunderstorms that are pulling ashore into Louisiana. And this whole system is going to be looping back around. Our winds gusting Galveston to 37 miles an hour. So don't forget, with the gusty winds, you got the rain, saturated ground, maybe some trees coming down. You have to watch out for that. But you'll get the showers coming through. And as Tevin was mentioning, then you'll get a dry slot. But the water is still going to come up. It has nothing to do with how much sunshine you're seeing. So it's likely that we're going to see some flooding through tomorrow. from Galveston towards Port Lavaca, also into the parishes of Louisiana with that onshore flow and everything rotating around this. The downpours will be big time, and big time even as you go inland. We could see a month's worth of rainfall. That 5 to 8, that's a month's worth of rainfall in this area. Houston, you're in that, more 3 to 5-ish. But Kelly, there's always an overachiever that likes to develop and pour down on us.
Exactly. I mean, some areas do need the rainfall, Steph, but the majority of the South is pretty waterlogged from previous storm systems. So we are concerned about flash flooding after this system makes the landfall and eventually slowly makes its way across eastern Texas into Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi. All these areas prone to flooding because of previous rain that we've already had. A lot of us are dealing with surpluses for the year, like Atlanta, and you've got heavy rain on the way. This is from Wednesday to Saturday. The Euromodel really cranks it out, especially here across the North Georgia mountains and down into Louisiana. Up to a foot of rain is possible. American model not as much, but still enough where we could see potential flooding. Jackson, Mississippi, it all starts Wednesday. This is when the weather really goes downhill. Windy conditions, thunderstorms lasting through Thursday. So this system is going to be around all the way through the end of the week. Today's only Monday, and this thing is moving so slowly. There's the European model showing that heavy rain pushing through the Tennessee Valley, and places like Atlanta, we are going to see some of that heavier rain affecting your commutes. So there's Thursday, not a good day. Temperatures in the upper 60s, and then still Friday, we're going to be dealing with the pop-up storms as well. So there's a look. We pick it up on Friday. You can see the heaviest rain falling north of Atlanta into the Piedmont of western North Carolina. Could see some flooding, even mudslides. You can't rule that out in some of the higher terrain there in the southern Appalachians. And take a look at these surpluses for many cities in the south. More than 15 inches for Atlanta and Huntsville, and also 20 inches for Birmingham. The Weather Channel has meteorologists stationed all across Texas this morning as Tropical Storm Beta moves closer to shore. Live reports straight ahead.
It's about the human.
Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow! Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
And perhaps you're doing a little traveling. It's time now for your travel forecast here at 38 past the hour. And man, do we have the rain coming in. This stuff, that's going to come down hard. It's going to come down heavy and fast. And that's really what we're worried about. Louisiana could see actually some of the highest totals from this system, even though it's making landfall into Texas, because it's very broad and you're getting that rotation around, counterclockwise flow, bringing up all that moisture into the parishes of Louisiana. Lake Charles still recovering from Laura, which made landfall a month ago come Wednesday. And we're going to see the showers as those recovery efforts continue. The big question is, where does the rain set up and just train over the same area? That is the big question. And that's what we'll keep our eye on, because that's where we will have the biggest totals and you will see the flooding. Don't forget that flooding, water, rain, surge, water is the #1 killer when it comes to these systems. And when you're getting more than a foot of rain potentially in some of these spots, and you're all the way in Louisiana, the thing's making landfall in Texas, you're probably like, oh, it's just a rainy day. No, this is from our tropical storm, and it will continue to be here as we head over the next 4 days. It could be significant, Kelly.
We could take that rain and put it over the fires in the west. California's wildfire season keeps on surging deeper and deeper into record territory. One reason, the Bobcat fire in northern Los Angeles County. Winds gusting 30 to 40 miles per hour let that fire explode to 100,000 acres over the weekend, meaning it has doubled in size since Thursday. Containment just 15%. And then there's the El Dorado fire in San Bernardino County. It's quarter the size of the Bobcat fire and nearly 60% contained. This fire was actually accidentally set by a gender reveal celebration. A firefighter lost his life battling that blaze last week. All right, unfortunately, we're up to 3.5 million acres burned in California. That is a new state record. We're keeping track from the northern part of the state all the way down into Southern California near the Mexican border. So that's producing a lot of smoke, very bad air quality, and unfortunately, it doesn't really look like it's going to get any better anytime soon. You can see 2020 so far topping the list of acreage consumed just in the state of California. Then we move it up into Oregon, where more than 1 million acres have been consumed. This is a tough fire season for folks up here too, but at least in Oregon, we did have that much needed rain late last week, and we've got more rain on the way. We're watching a storm coming from basically Alaska and the Aleutian Islands. That's going to be moving cooling on shore, increasing the humidity. That right there is good news for the firefight, but also the much needed rain comes through. Some of Northern California will get a piece of this, but unfortunately not the entire state of California. But rainy season does kick in as we go later into the fall and winter season. Steph?
This has been one of the most disastrous fire seasons in California's history. People have lost their homes and businesses, and for some, it's not the first time they've had to deal with this kind of life-altering devastation. This morning, our Justin Michaels takes a closer look at the emotional toll of these terrible fires.
You know, the reality of the devastation here in Berry Creek, California, seemingly has no end. The California wildfires have basically laid to waste everything in their path, leaving people with quite literally nothing. Can you imagine this being your house? Only a chimney left to show that there was even a house here. And what's worse is people are living through this for the second time in less than 2 years.
I'm tired. You know, I'm so tired after all this time.
Leslie Porteous and Steve Patterson have been living a nightmare.
We had to evacuate.
We had to. We lost everything.
We lost everything there.
The whole trailer park is just flattened.
They're not talking about losing everything in the North Complex fire over the last week. They lost everything in Paradise, California during the Camp Fire nearly 2 years ago.
For us, it's been a struggle ongoing since then. Well, we still haven't found a permanent home. We're not the only ones.
They've been living in shelter after shelter, even sleeping in a tent from time to time when they had no other place to go.
I saw the same clouds rises from the campfire. It was like reliving it all over again.
And that type of stress, along with other stresses like COVID, the economy, and social distancing, is causing post-traumatic stress syndrome, or PTSD, in many living through these wildfires.
They are dealing with acute loss, a loss of their community, sometimes a loss of their neighborhood, a loss of their home.
Nancy White is a mental health supervisor with the American Red Cross.
If they don't tell us that they're suffering, or if they keep it to themselves and we don't need that they need assistance, it could turn into a chronic condition for them.
So for people like Leslie and Steve, talking, getting the help they need, and having a plan is critical.
You know, I didn't really realize how emotionally buried all that was, and now it's coming out, and I'm so affected, and I didn't even know.
But when you have no place to go, that makes the entire situation even more difficult. So what's next for them?
The next day.
That's the $1 million question.
The next day.
Yeah.
You know,
waking up and
we're currently on a waiting list for to get sheltered inside, you know, in a hotel instead of out in the smoke.
The heartbreaking reality for so many in Northern California as the wildfires continue to rage and mental health stressors continue to grow. But at least for Leslie and Steve, they have each other. In Gridley, California, Justin Michaels, The Weather Channel.
Now, since the beginning of the year, wildfires have burned more than 3 million acres in the state. That's more than 26% higher than last year at this same time. Your tropical updates next.
All right, everybody. Most trusted TV news network.
We've got a severe weather threat. Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
The Weather Channel.
When you drive into Port O'Connor, Texas, the sign says, "Welcome to the end of the road." And here we are, almost at the Gulf of Mexico, right? I've got Matagorda Bay over there. I've got the Intercoastal Waterway over there. this is not supposed to be filled with water, but streets are being filled with water because of the storm surge and the elevated water levels. And so this street, I'm walking on it. I was supposed to drive my car through here last night. Luckily, I took it out so that I don't need to do this, because this would make me worried. And by the way, this water is very clear, seems very clean, but this entire stretch here is supposed to be dry land. So a marshy area, not a spot that anyone has built, but is normally dry. We've got water covering this entire stretch, this entire street. And you notice as I look out in this distance, the water goes almost over to those homes, which are all built up on stilts. For the very reason that we are a coastal community known, of course, for the fishing and the birding and everything else, but of course for water. Also known for the very persistent onshore flow that we get here, those southeaster winds. Do you notice that the power poles are all kind of bent a little bit? It looked to me like, wow, they're already halfway down. They're going to come down in even tropical storm force winds. But I've learned that actually, no, it's designed that way. They're built and set at an angle to deal with the very persistent northeast winds southeast winds that we normally get here across coastal Texas. Now, that said, we're getting a north wind today. A north wind is coming in, and you can see that in the sky. If you take a look up at the clouds up here, you can see the clouds just racing in, coming in from the north. They've been moving very fast, all moving along. And this is going to be our pattern until the storm pushes just a little bit closer. And we do think it's going to come in either right over Port O'Connor or maybe even just off to our west, which has put us on that eastern side. That's the wrong side to be on, if you will. You get some of the onshore flow plus the increase in winds as well. So conditions throughout the day, tropical storm force winds, gusts over 50 miles an hour possible here in Port O'Connor. The rain was going to start to pick up soon. And then, of course, you've got this surge flooding. Let's go back down to Rockport, Texas. And Tevin, let's talk about the impacts there, because I've had this north wind. It sort of has a dry feel to it. It doesn't feel like a tropical storm here.
Yeah, Jen, the north wind not only dry, but it's also a bit chilly out here too. Of course, my jackets are a bit wet because of the rainfall that we've seen throughout the course of the morning. So that does give you a little wind chill feel as well. But where we are right now here in Rockport and Fulton, Texas, we're right along the Copano Bay here. And let me show you the lay of the land. We're actually right along the bay, such that you can almost kind of tell that the overwash that we're getting throughout this this area, this picnic table, the benches that we have here, if I were to step over by about 2 or 3 yards, I'd fall right into the water. So I'm not going to do that, but you can see, because the water is so high, because of this onshore flow, we are starting to see that water level continue to rise. So as it rises, it dumps a little debris here, some sand, some shells as well, occasionally 1 or 2 dead fish too that are out in the water. Some of the birds come and they like to feast on that. But let's feast on the forecast, because beta is still not done just yet. It was very interesting to watch throughout the course of last night how beta sort of fizzled away a little bit, but then relatively quickly this morning, I remember waking up and looking at the satellite presentation, that explosive development overnight and earlier this morning. Beta is not done just yet. Don't count this storm out just yet. We've got a multitude of threats. The flash flood threat, of course, that stretches from here all the way into southern portions of Louisiana, and then the storm surge threat as well along the Gulf Coast. Steph?
Talk about what we are dealing with overall here in your tropical update. Of course, we have beta that we're all following. We also have Teddy. If you live along the East Coast, Teddy is teaming up with a high pressure, and all along the East Coast, we are seeing that water rise and also that surface high as well. 23 named storms. It is a hyperactive season and a record-breaking 2020. So let's get to the maps here and talk about what we're going to see not only within the next week, but the next 6 weeks. Hurricane season goes until November 30th. First, we're going to start you with beta. That dry air does look like it'll hold those winds at bay, even though, as Tevin was mentioning, we've got those pulses. It is trying, and it is going to try to stick around for quite a while, and it will be successful. It takes until Friday to get to Mississippi. The entire week we'll be dealing with the rain. Now, we actually, just with the 8 a.m. advisory, have another area to watch here in Florida. This is different than that swirl. If you were watching over the weekend, this is brand new. Pembroke Pines seeing over 2 inches of rain. Anyone seeing any flooding here in South Florida? Let us know, only if it's safe to do so. Also into Boca, seeing that heavy rain too. And this is an area we're going to watch. It has a small chance of development, but hey, it's 2020 and we're at the height of hurricane season, so you always have to keep a close eye on these systems. Really, as we head into our Thursday and Friday is when it has its best chance for development, so we'll continue to keep a close eye on that. Teddy, we're watching, yes, because it's affecting Bermuda, but it's affecting us along the East Coast. All right, and here's the thing. It is going over where Paulette went over, and we have that upwelling. You see this cooler water temperatures below 80 degrees, and tropical entities to develop at the least, they need water temperatures at 80 or higher. And so that will actually cause problems for this storm. It will eventually slam into Nova Scotia. And we have had storms here in the past, many storms into Nova Scotia. But it's Teddy teaming up with our high pressure that is causing the strong winds along the East Coast and that flooding and that potential as we head over the next couple of days. Kelly, literally from New England all the way down into Florida. We've already seen it into Florida, the Carolinas, North Carolina, and also into Charleston.
Yeah, major flooding in some cases, high rip currents too. Sweater weather, though, has also arrived. Pumpkin spice lattes being served. Many of you will be glad to say goodbye this summer if it was a long, hot one for you. But check out the fall color now being seen in Vermont. The drone flying over Norton Pond, parts of the Northeast, definitely feeling like it. Highs only reaching the low 60s after overnight lows fell through the 30s.
And this morning, all eyes are on Tropical Storm Beta, the 23rd named storm of this record-setting hurricane season. It is just off the Texas coast, and it's already causing flooding with that onshore push. And we're seeing heavy rainfall as well, stretching all the way into Louisiana. So far this year, 8 named storms had made landfall on the mainland United States. The record for a single season is 9, set back in 1916. It looks like we'll tie that with the landfall of Beta. And by the way, Beta will be the first time we have had a named storm that's in the Greek alphabet make landfall in the lower 48. And because of all that, we have a team of meteorologists across the Gulf Coast. Jen Carfagno inundated with the water into Port O'Connor, Texas this morning. She'll show us around. Tevin Wooten also seeing that high water into Rockport, Texas, an area that's still dealing with Hurricane Harvey that was just a disaster back in 2017. First, let's go to Kelly to show you what it looks like from coast to coast here, Kelly.
Yeah, storm surge has already occurred with Beta, even though it hasn't made landfall yet. We'll likely do that later on today. But you can see the flooding in places like Galveston, Freeport, Surfside Beach in Texas. Part of the 61st Street fishing pier in Galveston actually collapsed into the Gulf, and you can see the water just rushing under the homes on stilts at Surfside Beach. Some roads already underwater, even up towards Harris County. I'm seeing reports of surge flooding now, and the impacts will likely last all day long today. Beta slowly working its way toward the Texas coastline. But Steph, those rain bands, they extend well from center all the way to Louisiana.
They do. And watch this thing. It's trying. It is really trying hard. You see these explosive thunderstorms, but there's a lot of dry air. And so it's fighting that right now. And you're probably thinking, okay, this is Beta. What is this blob of storms? Is this something else we have to watch? This is all connected here with the whole counterclockwise flow around that. And so we're getting that rain into the parishes of Louisiana, and we're getting that surge as well. That water is rising too. So look at the whole big flow around the system. It is really expansive here, getting all the way actually into Arkansas, if you can believe it. And I'll tell you, yes, water is going to be the big issue with this one. But if you're in the eye wall of even a tropical storm, you're going to know it. You're going to feel it. You'll feel those winds pick up. Heavy rain, though, coming into Louisiana. Winds gusting near 48 at Galveston and Corpus Christi, Victoria, Houston, gusting to 38 miles an hour. Tropical storm warnings extend all the way over towards Morgan City, Louisiana. And again, we are in Louisiana and we're seeing that water rise. Look at this. Okay, the Bonacera floodway, 4 feet. Why? Because you have that east wind, and I'm seeing reports of the water splashing over here from Lake Pontchartrain because of that east wind. And Jen, we're going to get the storms as well with this. Some of them could be a little feisty, and it's all about the wind direction, right? And so a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm not right on the Gulf of Mexico, I'll be okay. But if you get that north wind like you're getting, if you get, you know, a west wind, you're going to get flooding on the backside of some of those barrier islands there along the Texas coast.
Well, exactly, Steph. I thought it was so interesting when I talked to Galveston earlier this morning about how they've had so many impacts and yet so far away from every system that has impacted them, from Laura, from Hannah, and now, of course, from Beta. They're dealing with the flooding. And, you know, Beta is coming in closer to me in Port O'Connor. 200 miles up the road, they're dealing with flooding in Galveston. Now, we are dealing with some flooding here in Port O'Connor, Texas. As you can see, I'm standing in the street right by the place that I'm staying here, close to the Intercoastal. It's on the other side of the building, or just off to the south. But this water, you know, is filtering up any low-lying areas. This will happen. Any little estuaries, any little inlets, that water is going to come up. This area behind me is normally dry ground, but it is filled with water because, of course, you've got the tides running. We're at 3.82 at last check here. So we're still running high up into moderate flooding in Port O'Connor. Now, another thing I want to point out about this area, in case you didn't see it before, is the risk for power outages and the fact that the poles, the telephone poles, are already at a slant. And this is because they get a very persistent wind coming in from the southeast here most of the year. So the poles are set that way to account for that. So hopefully that will help us out, although we are getting a north wind right now, which you can really see in the clouds. And that view to me has just been so dramatic all morning long. Look at the sky. You can see these clouds just racing and coming in from the north. We've got rain actually sitting just off to my north and east. It's not too far away. It's about to get to the Big Jetty. If you know this area, you've ever been fishing in Port O'Connor, you know about the Little Jetty, and I just learned about these, the Little Jetties and the Big Jetty, and that rain is just about at the Big Jetty, about 6 miles away. So that's coming here soon. We'll get into the rain. We'll get into the tropical storm force gusts through the afternoon. It's all about duration with this system, just like so many of our slow-moving systems this year. When you're in, you know, the persistent wind, when you're seeing that water build up for hours on end, maybe more than one high tide cycle like we've been dealing with, you have more impacts, and obviously filled streets are one of those unfortunate side effects. Let's go back down to Rockport, Texas, and check in with Tevin. And Tevin, I heard you mention earlier this morning that you actually had a heavier rain shower. Did you get a lot of rain since then?
Yeah, Jen, we had rain for about 2 to 3 hours here along the Copano Bay area and Rockport and also Fulton. Only amounted to about 0.21 inches or so, at least per the rain gauge at the airport. But here's the thing, the gauge was up, the temperature gauge though was down, so I'm not necessarily sure if that observation is entirely correct. It may be a little bit underestimated because of some sort of technical difficulty. But let me show you where we are right now along the Copano Bay fishing pier. A lot of people would come out, but because the water's so high, they can't come out today. Part of the reason the water is so high, we've seen this onshore flow of winds from the north, and look at what it's doing to the waves back here. The waves are starting to white cap over and crash right into the seawall. Keep in mind, yesterday the storm was about 150 to 200 miles away. Now we've got a storm that's right around 100 to 110 miles away. Some of the strongest gusts near the center of the storm, 50, maybe 52 or 55 miles per hour. What we've seen here are winds closer to 30 or 35 miles an hour for gusts and sustained winds near 20 or 25. So because of this flow from the north, we started to take a lot of the water from north of the Copano Bay area, and it streams all the way down. Some of the water in the St. Charles Bay, the Mesquite Bay as well, and the Carlos Bay as well. So a lot of the water in different bays, Steph, on the sound side or on the north side of a lot of the barrier islands here, that starts to really just build on in. And so then it starts to flow this way like we're seeing right here. So that can cause some water flooding, even though we don't necessarily have the water falling from the sky right now. And we're also not in the Gulf of Mexico. That's on the other side of the island. So yes, several different ways, Steph, for water to come in and around some of the low-lying areas here in southeast Texas.
Yeah, now we want to go north of you into Galveston. Here's a look at Galveston. You see the roads are blocked off because of the flooding at this intersection. And we've actually had several cameras on Galveston showing us streets that are covered in water right now, the entire street. Of course, it is a barrier island here. It is barely 3 miles across at its widest point. The average elevation is 7 feet. Look at that, water across the entire road there. You're not getting through there at all. And new this morning, Justin Michaels reports Galveston is bracing for the worst of Beta's high water.
The threat of up to 4 feet of storm surge and rough seas have beach patrols on high alert in Galveston, Texas.
Our main goal is to keep people safe and to keep people away from the hazards that we have here.
Flooding from Beta is already taking over the streets in Jamaica Beach, Texas. 10 to 15 inches of rain is also forecast. Voluntary evacuations are in place.
We were lucky We're on the high side.
Molly Krejci lives a few miles away in Galveston's West End, another part of Texas notorious for flooding.
We took my small car and put it in a parking garage downtown Galveston. Just not that the water will get up here, but just in case.
People who live here in the west end of Galveston, well, they listen to emergency management, they listen to the Weather Channel, but there's another telltale sign they really pay attention to know whether or not they should evacuate: the wildlife.
The birds evacuate, I'm not too far behind them.
As the proverbial canaries in the coal mine, the birds evacuated the region before Hurricane Ike back in 2008. Gary Svetska followed them, and when the storm flooded the entire area with 18 feet of water, he was glad he did.
During Ike, they all left.
Everything left. Yeah, it was like a ghost town, ghost island.
But this time around, the birds seemed content to stay.
That's why we decided to stay. Just going to be a big rainmaker, we hope. You know, the birds aren't worried, so I'm not worried.
Businesses along the Texas coast are no stranger to hurricanes and know how to prepare. Guido's has been a staple here for more than 100 years. That's before hurricanes even had names. And so far, the restaurant has only met one storm it couldn't stand up to.
In 1936, our original location at Murdoch's was severely damaged. So many storms throughout the years: Ike, Harvey, and Guido's has been one of the first restaurants to open back up once these storms passed.
That year, a hurricane caused the restaurant to close and rebuild in its current location. Now Guido's and all of Galveston can add Beta to its list of storm stories. In Galveston, Texas, Justin Michaels, The Weather Channel.
Of course, Galveston built its protective seawall after the catastrophic hurricane of 1900, 17 feet high. I did speak with some Army Corps of Engineers over the year, and they said it's probably more around 15 feet because everything settles over, 120 years. The surge from Ike actually overtopped the wall. Experts have proposed an Ike dike, massive gates to close off Galveston Bay from surge, but the project has never gotten off the ground. Kelly, I was watching the water here, and the wind was actually blowing some of that water as well here in Galveston.
And just looking at the streets behind you there, Steph, it does look like the water levels have gone down a little bit, which is great news, but don't let your guard down, because obviously once we get our storm moving onshore, we'll likely see that storm surge rise once again. We actually did get over 4 feet in a few locations, including Jamaica Beach there in Galveston County, around San Luis Pass. You were over 4 feet for a time as well. So things are calming down for now, especially when we get towards low tide. But again, we'll have to watch times of high tide. And then when we get some of the heavier rainfall, it's going to be more difficult to drain it out because it all wants to go to the Gulf of Mexico, right? But when you have storm surge flooding, it's really difficult for that to happen. Even over towards Louisiana, we have a flash flood watch in effect already. We've been inundated with this rain band that's just been kind of sitting over the same location. I'm really worried about some of these places like Lafayette getting into some of that heavy rain, even New Orleans and Baton Rouge. Watch out for some training of storms well away from the center. I mean, the center is going to be affecting Texas moving onshore later on this evening or tonight, but over towards Louisiana, those bands are extending your way, and it looks like they don't want to quit anytime soon. It's going to be raining all day long, even into Tuesday, because we have such a slow-moving tropical system. Tropical moisture, of course, not a good thing when it comes to heavy rainfall and the potential for flooding. It is likely to happen in Houston and Galveston. That's not even including storm surge, and then over towards eastern Louisiana between tomorrow and Wednesday morning, Steph. This thing barely moves between now and Wednesday.
Yeah, it takes till Friday to get to Mississippi. We're going to literally be with us all week. Now, speaking of this week, as we head towards Wednesday, that will mark 1 month since Category 4 Hurricane Laura devastated Lake Charles, Louisiana. Now they have to deal with the rain. We could see flash flooding happening here, and that's really going to slow the restoration and the cleanup process there. More than 12,000 homes and businesses still don't have electricity across Lake Charles and Calcasieu. And coming up in 10 minutes, we're going to speak with the mayor of Lake Charles to talk about his biggest concerns and how that cleanup process is going. And it's not only at the coast. Look inland. We could see 4 or 5 inches of rain for us here into Louisiana. And don't forget that east wind right now is pushing over Pontchartrain and causing some flooding and can cause that water to splash over. So it's all about the wind direction. That is key when you're following these storms. Because if you get a southerly flow, even as far east in Louisiana, well away from the center of the circulation, you're going to see that water rise. And we actually are seeing that. And we're going to see those winds gusting 20, 25 miles an hour. So there's the rain pulling in. Again, this is Bourne, this is Pontchartrain. With that east wind, that water is going to be splashing over there on the west side of it, because an east wind is a wind that comes from the east and goes west. The other problem in Louisiana is the rain. We might get more rain out of this system than, we certainly got out of Sally as it moved east, but, maybe even out of Laura, because we're going to see that training setting up, and you're going to see those showers really pour down in the same areas. So flooding is likely tomorrow through Wednesday, and some of us could see a month's worth of rain, Kelly, in a matter of 3-4 days.
Yeah, that is certainly not good news. Today, the last full day of summer, by the way. Fall officially begins tomorrow morning, 9:31 Eastern time, the autumnal equinox, but fall arrived ahead of schedule. This past weekend, it was chilly in parts of the Northeast, even down the Appalachians into parts of the South as well. Many of you waking up to temperatures in the 30s, and that's why you've had those frost advisories in effect for some areas. Caribou, Maine, not quite a record, but the low so far 38 degrees. Binghamton down to 40. Syracuse and Rochester mid 40s, still not really close to your record, but definitely below average. A little too soon for some of you. It's funny the reaction I'm seeing on social media. Some of you are excited to see frost. Others are not so happy about it. Like, this is too soon. All right, 5 to 15 degrees below average. Even in the south, we're low 70s in Atlanta. That's it for the high temperature. High pressure delivering not just the cooler air, but the drier air all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. So it is kind of a welcome change considering it's been a long, hot summer for so many. Tomorrow morning, we may either tie or break records, getting very close in places like Binghamton. If we do get down to 35, that will tie a record. Allentown getting within 1 degree of your record, getting down to 37 degrees. And the cooler night, Steph, having an effect on the fall foliage. We're starting to see some color turning, especially in the mountains.
That it is. All right, well, we will continue to bring you up to date on what's happening in the Atlantic, but let's talk about what's happening close to home here with Jen Carfagno in Port O'Connor, Texas. Jen.
Yeah, all right, Steph, the rain is getting a little bit closer to us, inching in. Actually, I'm starting to get some light drizzle right now, but it's going to pick up. I'm watching just over to my east of Matagorda. The rain is coming down. It's heading here. So coming up, we'll have an update on the conditions. This low-lying area is dealing with water covering the roadways. What else will we deal with from Tropical Storm Beta? More right here on the Weather Channel after this.
Your carpets are...
Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we. Get the information you need to stay safe every day, right here on the Weather Channel.
All right, well, we want to take you to Bermuda, where things have just been rough as Teddy has been spinning nearby. Massive waves here over the weekend. Right now, our storm's at 100-mile-per-hour winds. That makes it a Category 2. And of course, we just got hit with Paulette recently, right? And we're going to have to deal with this. Now, how is this going to affect us here in the lower 48? Well, we're getting the waves and also the winds from Teddy that are fighting the winds from a high pressure, and they're really strong right in between them. So here's our storm. There's Teddy. There's Bermuda moving off to the north-northeast at 9 miles an hour. But look at the buoy heights, even off the coast of North Carolina, 19 feet, 10 feet as you go down towards the Florida and Georgia coast. And again, we have this low and this high. It's like putting your thumb over the end of a hose and the water squirts out faster. That's what's happening here. The wind is getting shoved in between these two systems, and so it's accelerating and causing coastal issues literally from New England down to Florida, the entire East Coast. And we've already seen those issues here into Charleston. We've seen them in Florida. And don't forget, you have the St. John River. And if you get that northeast wind, that's pushing all that water inland up the river, and you get flooding. And so even inland, you could have those issues. How about Charleston? Look at that. 2.3. We're going to have major flooding for us here. I know we've seen it over the weekend, and you'll be sloshing through that water again. Highway 12 here in the Outer Banks is actually shut down in some places because of all the water and all of the sand as well that we've been seeing here. And unfortunately, this is going to be lasting as we head through the day today and into Tuesday, as this storm, by the way, producing 100-foot waves. That's as high as a 10-story building out to sea. Pretty impressive stuff. Well, it's been nearly a month since Laura slammed into